What if the relationship you thought was finally becoming stronger is actually heading straight toward its biggest heartbreak? That's exactly what makes Off-Campus Season 2 so exciting, because Dean and Ally may have found something real, but that doesn't mean their story is going to get any easier. Season 1 gave us the chemistry, the arguments, the unexpected feelings, and that brutal cliffhanger that changed everything between them. But Season 2 is about to take all of that and push it even further. We're talking emotional confrontations, painful choices, old relationships coming back to haunt Ally, and one major loss that could completely change the way Dean and Ally see each other. So, if you thought their biggest problem was Hunter, think again, because what's coming next could be much more painful. And with Season 2 already in production, we're finally starting to get a clearer idea of where this story is heading. So, let's break down everything we know so far, because Dean and Ally's relationship may be about to enter its most difficult chapter yet. The biggest question going into Season 2 is obviously what happens after that shocking Season 1 ending. Dean finally realized just how deep his feelings for Ally had become, only to discover that she had completed her mission with Hunter. And for Dean, this wasn't just another relationship problem. Hunter was someone he already hated, someone he never wanted anywhere near his life, and suddenly he found out that Ally had a connection with him that he couldn't simply ignore. That's why Dean completely lost control, and the fight at the end of Season 1 felt like the perfect setup for what comes next. But here's the interesting part. Dean and Ally's relationship was never really built on the kind of attraction we usually see with Dean and other women. Ally didn't fall for his reputation, she didn't care about his charm, and she certainly wasn't impressed by the fact that everyone else wanted him. Instead, she challenged him. She called him out. She made him actually work for her attention. And that's exactly why Dean became so invested in her. By the time Season 1 ended, Dean wasn't just chasing Ally because he wanted another relationship. He genuinely wanted to understand her. We saw that in all those smaller moments where he was willing to step outside his usual world just to be around her. Even something as simple as sitting through Ally's terrible French soap opera showed how much he had changed. This is the same guy who could have been out partying, but instead he chose to sit beside the girl he cared about and listen to her explain every ridiculous detail of a show he didn't even like. That might seem like a small thing, but it says everything about Dean's feelings. For once, he wasn't trying to impress someone. He was simply trying to be there for her. And that's why Season 2 could hurt so much more. Because now that Dean and Ally actually have something worth protecting, there's also something much bigger that can be taken away from them. Ally is still carrying the damage from her past with Shawn, and Shawn isn't exactly ready to disappear quietly. His behavior is expected to become even more disturbing, and there's a moment ahead that could completely break Ally emotionally. She's going to reach a point where she can't handle everything alone, and that's when Dean becomes more important than ever. But even then, their relationship won't suddenly become perfect. In fact, the biggest challenge may still be waiting for them. Season 2 is setting up a story where love, grief, trust, and fear all collide, and Dean and Ally are going to have to decide whether what they built together is strong enough to survive it. And this is where things are about to get much more emotional, because the biggest threat to Dean and Ally might not actually be another person. It might be everything they're both carrying inside. Ally has already been through a lot, and even though Dean has become someone she can depend on, trusting him completely is still going to be difficult. She's spent so much time protecting herself that letting someone get close enough to see the real her comes with a huge risk. And Dean, despite everything he feels for her, still has his own insecurities to deal with. He's used to being the guy who knows exactly what to do, but Ally doesn't make things that simple. She forces him to slow down, listen, and actually think about how his actions affect someone he loves. That's why their relationship feels so different from anything Dean has experienced before. But just when it seems like they might finally be finding their balance, Shawn is going to make things even more complicated. His behavior after the breakup shows just how far he's willing to go, and one of the most painful moments ahead involves him showing up at the girl's flat and attacking Ally with cruel words. It's the kind of moment that reminds us why Ally has struggled to move forward in the first place. she isn't simply trying to forget an ex. She's trying to recover from someone who made her question herself. And when that confrontation leaves her completely broken, she finally reaches the point where she needs someone she trusts. That's when she tells Hannah to call Dean. Honestly, that moment says more about Dean and Ally than any romantic scene could, because when everything falls apart, Dean is the person she wants beside her. But don't expect that to mean their problems are over. If anything, that's only the beginning. Season 2 is going to test whether Dean can actually be the person Ally needs when things stop being fun and romantic. Being there when someone is happy is easy. Being there when they're angry, scared, grieving, or completely shutting down is something else. And Dean is going to have to learn that love isn't about fixing every problem. Sometimes it's about staying when the other person doesn't know how to ask you to stay. Then comes the part that could completely change the emotional direction of the season. There is going to be a major loss, and it's not something Dean and Ally can simply talk their way through in one episode. Grief is going to create distance between them, and denial is going to make everything even harder. One of them may want to move forward while the other is still trapped in what happened. And when two people are already struggling with trust and communication, something this painful can create cracks very quickly. This is why the biggest heartbreak of season may second not come from a breakup. It could come from watching two people who genuinely love each other struggle to reach each other when they need one another the most. Still, I don't think the story is heading toward a permanent ending for Dean and Ally. The important thing about their relationship is that they've already survived situations that should have pushed them apart. Dean had to learn that Ally wasn't going to fall for his usual charm, while Ally had to slowly realize that Dean was becoming someone she could actually trust. Season 2 is simply going to take that trust and put it under the biggest pressure yet. And if the story follows the direction we're expecting, their relationship will eventually come back stronger because of everything they were forced to endure. But while Dean and Ally remain at the center of the emotional story, there's another reason Season 2 is so important. Off-Campus has never been about just one couple. The show is building an entire world around these characters, and while one relationship gets the spotlight, another one is already quietly being prepared in the background. And this time, the clues may be pointing toward Grace and Logan, because their story could become one of the biggest setups for what comes next. And this is where things get really interesting, because while Dean and Ally are dealing with their biggest emotional test yet, Season 2 is also quietly preparing us for another relationship that could become extremely important later on. If you remember where Logan was at the end of Season 1, he was still carrying feelings for Hannah, so the idea of him eventually becoming connected to Grace might seem a little unexpected. But that's exactly what makes their story so interesting. The show doesn't need to rush them into becoming a couple. Instead, Season 2 can slowly introduce Grace into Logan's world and let us watch their connection develop naturally. And honestly, that might make their eventual romance even more satisfying. Grace Ivers is already set to become an important character, and her introduction could give us some of the first real clues about where the series is heading after Dean and Ally's story gets more complicated. Her connection with Logan begins in a surprisingly awkward way, with Logan accidentally knocking on her door. It sounds like a simple meeting, but sometimes the smallest moments end up becoming the beginning of something much bigger. Logan may not realize it immediately, but Grace is going to become someone he can't simply ignore. And the more they interact, the harder it becomes for him to pretend that his feelings haven't changed. But don't expect their relationship to be smooth. In fact, Logan is going to make a huge mistake that could cost him Grace completely. At one point, he's going to describe her as a distraction, and if there's one thing we already know about Grace, it's that she isn't going to sit around waiting for someone to figure out whether they actually want her. That comment is going to hurt, and Logan is eventually going to realize just how badly he messed things up. But getting Grace back won't be as simple as saying sorry. She's going to make him work for it, and honestly, I'm completely on her side. What makes this even more entertaining is that Grace apparently has a very specific idea of what Logan needs to do to earn another chance. She'll have him complete an entire list of humiliating tasks throughout his sophomore year just to prove that he's serious about winning her back. And honestly, after calling her a distraction, maybe he deserves every single one of them. This could give season 2 some much-needed lighter moments while Dean and Ally are dealing with much heavier emotional material. But at the same time, it could also leave us with one huge question: how far will Logan actually go for Grace? And I have a feeling the show may not give us the full answer before the season ends. Season 2 could easily leave Grace and Logan's relationship somewhere in the middle of all that tension, giving us enough to become invested without completely finishing their story. That would make them a perfect setup for a future season. Because while Dean and Ally are dealing with grief and trying to protect what they have, Logan and Grace could be quietly becoming the next couple we're all going to be emotionally invested in. And that's something I really like about Off Campus. The story isn't treating each couple like they exist in separate worlds. Their lives overlap, friendships change, feelings evolve, and characters who seem like side stories can suddenly become incredibly important. Even Tucker's future story is already being teased in subtle ways. Those strange little details from season 1, including the recurring fruit references that kept getting bigger, may have seemed completely random at first. But if you know the books, you already understand why fans are paying attention. The show appears to be planting these details early so that when Tucker's story finally arrives, we'll realize the clues were sitting right in front of us the entire time. And that makes season 2 feel much bigger than just Dean and Ally. We're getting the heartbreak, the romance, the drama, and at the same time, the foundation for what comes next. But there's still one major question left: when are we actually going to see all of this? Because production is already moving forward, and the latest updates give us a much clearer idea of when season 2 could finally arrive. So, when can we actually expect to see Off Campus season 2? Well, the good news is that we're not just waiting around with no information. Season 2 is already moving forward, with production underway and the season expected to contain 8 episodes. That means the story is already being turned into something we'll eventually get to watch, and honestly, that makes all these relationship theories feel even more exciting. The current production timeline points toward filming wrapping around September 2026, but there still isn't an official release date. If everything stays on schedule, the season is currently expected to arrive sometime around May 2027. And yes, that still feels like a long wait, especially after the way season 1 left us hanging, but there's actually a good reason to be patient. Prime Video gave season 2 an early green light in 2025, and season 3 was also renewed in 2026. That is a pretty big deal because it means the creative team has more room to plan these stories instead of rushing from one season into the next. And with an ensemble series like Off Campus, that extra time can be extremely important. There are so many relationships developing at once, and the show needs to make sure each one gets the right amount of attention. Dean and Ally may be the main focus right now, but Grace and Logan are already being positioned for something bigger, while Tucker's future story is quietly being prepared in the background. So, what we see in season 2 could actually affect the direction of the series for several seasons to come. But honestly, the release date isn't even the part I'm most nervous about. It's what's going to happen when Dean and Ally finally have to face everything that's coming. Their relationship started with attraction, arguments, and a lot of uncertainty, but by the end of season 1, there was something much deeper between them. Dean had finally stopped treating Ally like just another girl he could charm, and Ally had started seeing the person underneath his reputation. That's why the heartbreak coming in season 2 is going to hit so much harder. We're not watching two people who barely know each other anymore. We're watching two people who genuinely care about each other being pushed into situations neither of them is prepared for. And that major loss could become the moment that changes everything. Grief can make people say things they don't mean, pull away from the people they love, and completely change how they see the world. Dean may want to protect Ally, but there may be moments when she doesn't want to be protected. She may need space instead of answers. And that difference could create some incredibly painful moments between them. The important thing, though, is that their relationship has already shown us that they can find their way back to each other. They just have to be honest enough to admit when something is wrong. That's what makes me believe season 2 won't simply be about whether Dean and Ally stay together. It's going to be about whether they can grow together. Can Dean become the person Ally actually needs instead of the person he thinks he should be? Can Ally allow herself to trust someone without constantly expecting everything to fall apart? And when the biggest heartbreak arrives, will they choose each other, or will the pain become too much? I have a feeling the answer is going to be emotional, messy, and probably leave us wanting the next season immediately. And with Grace and Logan already being set up, Season 2 could end up doing much more than continuing Dean and Ally's romance. It could completely reshape the future of off-campus. So now I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe Dean and Ally will actually survive the biggest heartbreak coming their way? Do you think their relationship will become stronger because of it, or could this be the moment that finally tears them apart? And what about Grace and Logan? Are you already excited to see their story begin? Let me know your theories in the comments. And of course, if you want more off-campus updates, trailer breakdowns, theories, and everything we learn about Season 2,